evening, and welcome to tonight's webinar on working with students and dynamic activities. For the sake of webinar quality, we were going to have everyone stay muted and keep all videos turned off. If you do have a question, you can type it in the chat panel and one of our moderators will respond back, or I will ask the presenter to stop. Real quickly, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Amy Chow, and I'm the National Training and Product Manager for Casio's Education Division. You can see kind of my bio there. And tonight for our presenter is Dr. Karen Greenhouse, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I recognize the name, so it's nice to see you all again. I'm Karen, currently an adjunct professor at Drexel University, spokesperson for Casio, math teacher forever, I think. Today, I am going to be sharing just some ideas on how to get students to show work on Classpad.net. So I wanted to do a quick poll just to see how familiar with Classpad everybody is. So I'm going to send this out to you real quick. So if you're on, if you could just answer that. I just kind of want to get a sense for how much kind of overview I might need to do before I dive into some specific things about strategies for helping students. All right, so far, I'm excited to see that we have people who are familiar with it, maybe not comfortable, but at least familiar. And if you do have an account, I would love for you to actually be signed into your account, because I am going to be doing some sharing, and I'm going to ask you to duplicate things and put them in your account, so that would be great. So I'm excited. I don't have to spend a lot of time. Here's the poll just for those of you who are interested. So it looks like everyone at least knows what Classpad.net is, so I don't have to go through that, which is fantastic. So I'm going to just dive right in. So today, I really kind of wanted to focus on some of the ways that you can use Classpad.net to get students to show their work. So in the chat panel, real quick, I want to kind of know what you think that term means. We always say that to students, you know, here's this, show your work. What does that mean to you as a teacher? So just in the chat panel, if you say that to students, what is it that you're expecting from them when you say show work? Hopefully, we get some responses in there, in the chat panel. What does show work mean? Seeing their thought process as they solve. Excellent. Justify your answer. Detailed steps. Okay, so that is what we tend to think of. Sometimes teachers just think it means show the calculation you did to get the answer. For me, particularly I like Amy's, showing your thought process and justifying your answer. I really like to emphasize, and I work with this with teachers in my Drexel course right now, not just showing the calculations that you did to do your work, but why were you able to do that? So what was the math property that allowed you to do that? So that's sort of what I'm trying to focus on here, is showing work is, because you can use Classpad.net, which has all these dynamic capabilities, you should have them writing, using properties, showing a graph, showing more than one way to justify their answer. So not just the answer, but maybe show a graph that shows the answer in a different way. So that's where I'm going today. I did want to start with what I call a bare naked math problem. And I would like to know if you've heard that expression before. So in the chat panel, do you know what I mean when I say bare naked math? Amy says no. Anyone else? I know it is granola. I don't know what that means, Tom.
There is a bare naked granola brand.
Okay.
I know, I recognize that.
All right, I forgot that I'm not actually sharing my screen, so that causes a problem. Let me see which one I want to do. I want one. All right, there we go. All right, so I'm going to explain what I mean by bare naked. And for those of you who are teaching or have taught or in the classroom, whatever, I'm thinking of when we give a student a worksheet, we've taught them a step. And in this bare naked example here, we've taught them, and this is unfortunately what we tend to do, cross, multiply, and divide. That is what we've taught them, and then we give them a worksheet of problems that look like this one that's on the left here. That's a bare naked problem. It has no context. really, what are we expecting? We're expecting them to practice this process or this skill that we taught them. And so when we say show the work, if you're just giving them bare naked problems, their work tends to be simply a calculation. So all of you are familiar with Classpad, so you'll see these are text boxes. So if I were to send this to a student, this bare naked problem, I might see just the process, right? So here's a calculator. So maybe they know, oh, I'm supposed to cross multiply and divide. So in my workspace, and for those of you who have not used the text sticky before as a math tool, this allows you to change the font size, but this right here allows you to do math type. So you'll notice that this is in nice fractional form or proportion, rational number form, because I used it in a math type line. Now, if I'm a student and I'm told I need to show my work, and I've just learned the process of cross multiply and divide, I'm going to maybe do this. I'm going to do 36 times 13, and I know that whole thing, I could put it over the fraction, and then that's going to equal C. This is the process I was taught, so that's what I'm doing to show my work. And then maybe I actually do it on the calculator. And so this is me showing my work again. And so my answer, so I showed what process I did, and then I show my answer as C's equal to, oh, I did the wrong thing here, sorry. I was like, that's not the answer. I've done this problem a couple times today. And notice, if you're signed into your account, I'm signed into my account, you have both forms, standard and decimal. So the student might do, I feel like I did the answer wrong.
Yeah, I think you switched your numbers.
I'm having a dyslexic moment. It's like, what is going on here? That's because I know what the answer is because I've done it so many times.
Right.
So I'm like, that is not the answer that I should be getting. Okay, there we go. All right. But actually, that was good. If I'd left that and this teacher saw the work, they would have realized that I just made a computation error. Like I did the right process, but I had the wrong calculations, right? So that's good for them to show your work. That's one of the reasons we ask them to show their work. So anyway, so this is a bare naked problem. There's no context. There's no expectation of, explaining when some of you said, justify your answer. What's the justification for what I just did? There is no real justification. It's, I followed your steps. You told me to cross multiply and divide, and that is what I did, and that's how I got my answer. And this is often what teachers accept from students when they say, show your work. Oh, this is great. I see that you set up the problem, you did the calculations, and good, that's great showing your work. To me, that is not sufficient. Because if I really want students to be applying their mathematics, I shouldn't be teaching them little tricks. I should be expecting them to use precise mathematics and to justify their mathematics, their work, with math properties or math definitions. So I wanted to show you this example for a couple reasons. First, using the text box in Classpad, students can actually write the mathematics or write the problems using the correct mathematical form because of the ability to do this math type. So that's something we're going to practice that in a little bit on our own. But I also wanted to show you that this is what most teachers would accept as showing your work, and that's fine. And you give them 20 problems of bare naked math. We do that a lot. A lot of teachers just give out worksheets. As a math teacher myself, I try to avoid that. I try to maybe give 5 problems because I really want them to focus on the properties and the justification and what math is allowing you to do this shortcut. So I wanted to show you what I meant by that and what I am thinking of as showing work. And as some of you said, detailed steps justifying your answer. This is a skill and a process that they've learned this shortcut. Here are some examples of how to make it more rigorous, more challenging, where you are actually asking them to identify the math operations makes it much more challenging. What What's the reason you can do this? What's actually happening? And then also ask them to solve it more than one way. So don't just give them bare naked math and 40 problems to do. Give them 5 and then ask for more explanation and actually using properties. And this way they're learning and recognizing how math is playing out and what's the reason they can do that. So here's the same problem, but this time you'll see the answer is slightly different. They still did the cross multiply and the divide, right? So they multiplied by the 13 and they ended up dividing by the 15, but they showed each step and the reason and the mathematics behind. I am really able to multiply by 13 because what's really happening is I'm multiplying by the multiplicative inverse of 1 over 13, which is 13 over 1, right? So that's really why I'm able to multiply by 13. And this right here, I have balancing here. I am able to do this because I know that when I multiply a 1 over 13 times 13 over 1, it's multiplicative inverse. This makes a 1, and 1 times c is c. So I do the multiplication here. This right here is simplifying. I actually did the math. And on this side, I use the multiplicative identity, the fact that a 1 times any number is itself, to end up with a c. So it's the same work, but with mathematical justification. So it's more complicated because they actually have to explain why they're able to do this cross multiply and divide. So now we're dividing, right? And really this is taking a rational number and simplifying it to its decimal form. So I was just simplifying a rational. So showing your work, this is merely skill based, whereas this is really applying mathematics. So this is sort of what I'm trying to help students to do, is that everything you do in math has a reason. It's not just a trick. And so if you actually ask them to show their work and show their math, you're justifying what's happening. And the more they do this, the more they start recognizing that these properties that we teach them, often we just teach the properties and never go back to them. We just assume they've learned them, and if they're constantly using them, then they start recognizing, oh, that's the multiplicative, and that's why I know that this is a 1, and things didn't just disappear or cancel out. They actually became a 1, and 1 times c is the multiplicative identity. So they start using it. So this is one example of showing work, and again, in the text in Classpad, it's really easy to show their work in true mathematical form because of the ability to have this math type right here. I can show rational numbers the way they should look. All right, so this is one example of how you can have them show their work. So explanation in the text box, and then actually you also see their, oh, my mouse is going crazy. Maybe I should slow down, sorry about that. And then they actually have the calculate sticky too to actually show their calculations. So they're kind of doing a couple ways, and you could see if they made a mathematical error. So the nice thing about this is you see their justification, and you can see they understood what was going on, but then if you look and the answer was wrong, like I had up above, you could say, oh, they just did the wrong numbers or something, but they knew what they were doing. So that's also helpful. Here's another way, same problem, that a student could have shown their work. And I often encourage my math teachers, and when I worked with students, that you should do your work, right? You show your work and get your solution, but then check your solution or verify your solution by doing the problem a different way. So again, not giving them 40 problems because that would take forever, but giving them 5 problems because they're really going to do those problems 2 different ways, right? It's a lot of work. So here's the same problem again, and this time it's a different approach. The work is, well, this is a rational number. I could change it to its decimal equivalent. So that's understanding that I can simplify a rational to its decimal equivalent. And now I have just a decimal equal. It's not a proportion anymore. So now I can multiply both sides by the multiplicative inverse. And that gives me this situation here. This is a multiplicative identity again. And now I'm just going to multiply 13 by 2.4, getting the same result. So different way to think about it, different. And this is really applying different number sets, right? Understanding that you can have equivalent number forms. So another option, and here is finally a third way, not one that most people would think of to solve a proportion problem, but it is possible, like visually showing it. So basically making each side its own equation and graphing each and then showing the intersection. And what does that intersection actually represent? So then they could write that in here in the explanation. This intersection represents the y is this side in its decimal form, and the x is where this value will make them equivalent, where they have the same value. So just different ways that students can show work and make a bare naked problem that is more skill-based, make it a little more rigorous by expecting them to always justify with the math properties. So that was just an example. And I am now going to move in. I'm hoping that you guys all have Classpad.net open. And you could be in your account. If you're in your account, that'd be great, because I'm going to show you some things to duplicate and stuff like that. I'm going to kind of treat you like students. So what I want to show you is, let's say we're going to be talking about how to share and see what students are doing while you are working with them. So I want to kind of go through, if you haven't seen this before, how to share and duplicate activities. So right now, if hopefully you have your account open, I've been working on this, and I'm going to send this to you. Like, so if you want this to save in your own account. So if you've never done this before, when you create an activity in Classpad.net, if you go to the 3 dots at the top of the paper that you've created, there's a share button. There's also description. So I might want to put a description in for this paper for someone who's looking at it. This is just examples of how to make a bare naked problem a little bit more rigorous. You could put tags in, but I want to share it. So if you've never shared before, default of Classpad.net papers is always private, meaning it's just your paper in your account. You can choose URL, which means kind of like if you're sharing in Google Docs, it's the same thing. If I give this URL to somebody, they can open this paper and a copy of this paper, basically. This right here, we're actually going to go explore a little bit later how to set up a paper to be a homework paper and what that means. But right now, I'm just going to do URL share. So I'm going to apply it, and I'm going to get the URL, and I'm going to send this to everybody in their chat panel, because basically what I want to demonstrate right now is something that you are going to want to do with students. So if everyone could open this paper by clicking on that URL, hopefully that went to everybody. And what you're going to find, and I'm going to show you what happens when you open it, show you the difference. So I've shared it. So let's say this was something I was sending to my students. I've shared it with them. I want them to work on it. I want you to notice the difference right now. I have opened it like you have. And so what you should see right now, if you opened it, technically this is a copy of my paper. Whatever happens on here does not impact the original at all, but it's not in my account. So if you notice, this is opening it just from the URL. It opens it up sort of in guest mode. And so here's the difference. I'll show you the difference. So this is me at my original paper. I've got my cloud. I know I'm in my account. This is if you just open the paper, you're a student, you've opened the URL, and you are going to look at the paper. So the first thing that you'd want to do, if you were a student or a teacher or whatever, is you want to duplicate the paper. So basically, you're making a copy for your own account. So that's why I'm hoping you guys are actually open in your own accounts, because if you are, you have this option right here to duplicate. So whenever you do send something to students to work on, they should have their account open when you do that. And their first thing, the habit you want them to get into, is to duplicate it. And so when I hit duplicate, and I probably should have titled this different, because now I have 2 copies of it, but you'll see the difference. Once you duplicate it into your own account, now you have the cloud. So this is now your version of my paper. It won't be impacted, and now you can work on it, right? So I wanted to make sure I just went through those steps, because I'm going to be asking you to do a couple things in a minute. So this paper now lives in your account. If I were a student, I could work on this. I could save it. I could then if I need to send back my paper to my teacher, I have to now make my own URL to send back to the teacher, because this is now my version of the original. So that's what's happened there. Any questions before I move on? I wanted to just make sure everyone was clear on how to take something that you've opened as a guest and duplicate it into your own account, because we're going to be doing that a couple times later.
No questions.
Okay, so I am going to close out my duplicate. I don't need that. And what I'm going to do first, I'm going to open up a new paper. Oh shoot, that's not what I wanted to do. I needed that paper. That's for later. You'll see. You've just got a sneak peek at something for later. I'm going to open a new paper here because I'm done with my bare naked math example. What I wanted to do, and if you want to play along, I'm going to actually just demonstrate real quick. If you've never actually worked in a text box and you want to just, so this is just text box demo. So to use the math type, it's pretty easy. You open a text box, and remember, 3 dots always means you can do more. So in a text box, you can change the color. And I tend to, whenever I make activities, have my directions in one color, usually the color that matches the banner. And then my student responses, I always make yellow for some reason. I don't know why, but it is what I do. But in a text box, typing, change your font. I tend to use 3, but they're all good. But I want to just make sure you understand how to use the math type. So when you do the math type, it creates a math line. And they're working on making it in line. And what do I mean by that? So if I start typing, solve this equation, and I want to put the equation here, but I want it to be in math type, it won't do that for me. If I hit the math type now, it always puts it on the line below. So they are working, the R&D team is working on a way to keep things in line, but right now they're not. So whenever you open a math type line, it'll always go down to the next place. So if I say solve this equation, now the minute you do that, you'll notice you have your entire soft keyboard available to you. So that's really nice because you can use every template that's in here. So you could use the fractions, the exponents, the logs. If you go into math, all of these are available to use in this math type. And so that way you're not, if you wanted to, I don't know why it's doing that. Let's get out. If I wanted to, I don't know why it is creating a math type. Stop. All right. If I wanted to make a fraction and I didn't use math type, this is how it looks, and that can be confusing, as we all know with students. Or if I wanted to do an exponent, in linear, it looks like this. So the math types allows you to actually make it look the way you want it to. So if I wanted a fraction, I could use this template, and then I can use my exponents, and I can even use subscripts, but I don't need a subscript now. That doesn't make any sense. So that's the beauty of math type, is you can actually make whatever you're asking students to look at, solve, or whatever, look the way that it should in correct mathematical symbols type of thing. So you can make as many math lines as you want, but again, just remember, if you're typing and you kind of wanted it to be in line with it, it's not going to be. It's always going to create a line underneath. So that's just a brief how-to. I am going to now send you something, and I want you to do a couple things. So I'm sending you an assessment, and I want you to actually practice. You don't have to solve the whole thing. Oh, wait, I already have it open. So I just sent you this. So if you open it, this is what it looks like. And what I'd like you to do is just practice. So basically, I'm asking you to solve this for X. But if you were my student, I would expect you to show me your work and justify the properties that you use for each step. So really what I want you to do right now is to practice using math types. So just take a couple, I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to practice, try to do the math type at least once. So in this space here, make another math type line and try it. So I'm just going to give you a couple minutes to try that on your own. If you want to keep going and try to get to an answer, that's fantastic. You'll notice that I'm asking them to show their steps to get a solution, and then I'm asking them to take the original and put it in the equation, and take their solution and put it in their equation, and explain how that graph represents the answer. So this is a multiple kind of representation explanation of this solution. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes. And just as a heads up, I am going to ask one brave soul to share their as far as they got with me, because I just want to show you how you could be doing this with your students. What you could be doing this in a Zoom meeting or however it is, and how you could then share student work with others. All right, even if you're not done, hopefully you've got at least one thing done. So if these were my students, I would want them to duplicate the paper, the URL that I sent them, so that it's in their paper. So everybody do that. Make sure you duplicate it. Do that first. And so then if you know you've duplicated it, if your cloud save comes on. And then I'm going to ask someone, hopefully one of you is brave enough to do it. I would like you, once it's duplicated, you can now share it. So if this was my students, they've done their work, and I now want them to send me their paper so that I can grade it or whatever. So they need to send me their URL. So I want you to practice creating a URL. So you're going to go to, once you've duplicated it, you're going to go to the 3 dots and go to share, and you're going to choose URL and apply it and create your own URL, your own version of the work. And then if one brave soul would like to just put their URL into the chat panel, I'm going to show you what a teacher then might do. Hopefully I have one of you do it. I can't force you, I know. And it's okay if it's not done. It doesn't have to be done. No one's going to be brave and share me their URL, even if you didn't finish. Thank you, Robin.
I see one.
All right. So if I were working with students, right, I've sent them this, they've all had some time to work on their own, and then maybe we're going to look at different answers and different responses. They can send their URLs once they've created, duplicated, and shared. They can send their URLs through the chat panel, or if this is actually a homework, they could put it in, the class web page or the Google page, wherever they do. And that's basically how they turn in their work, right? So they're turning in their work. And so I then could open up, so I have just clicked on Robin's, and I have opened up Robin's work on the paper that I sent. So this is Robin's work, and so she's shown her work. Now, if I were the teacher, Robin did not justify with the properties. No, I'm just kidding. And then she's trying to do so as a teacher, I could now assess Robin's work. And for those of you who are wondering what's going on here, this is not a calculate sticky. She was trying to solve it, and a calculate sticky would have helped her solve it that way. So I can then assess students and look at their work and figure out what they did, and I can understand their thinking and figure out where they made their mistakes. And she obviously knows some of the math that she's supposed to do. She did nice work here, but I might say, hey, can you tell me what property you used? I could send back information that way. So this is what we would, and Thomas, let's look at Tom. So I could be doing this if I'm online, or if students are offline actually doing a URL homework assignment that I Tom, it says your paper does not exist. I don't know why. Oh, because you sent the long URL, that's why. So Tom has sent me his, so let's look at Tom's. Well, it still doesn't exist, Tom. So we're gonna move on. So anyway, so this was just an example of how you can get students. You can use the text sticky to be showing work, identifying properties, and then use other tools within Classpad to also show work. So now you can show a graph, a visual representation of what they were talking about in the text sticky. What I want to do next is talk about, and I'm just going to kind of move down here, other ways, where text lives in other stickies that you could also use as a way for students to demonstrate their understanding. So I'm going to pull up a graph sticky. So a graph sticky, most of you are familiar with this, so hopefully you've had a little bit of understanding. The graph sticky graphs things, right? So if I click on this, I can type in a function, and so I don't know, let's do. So there's a graph, and then let's do another one. Let's do an inequality. All right, so let's say this is what the students are doing, and I ask them to explain, things within the graph. So they could get a text sticky here and explain, but you can also actually type text directly on the graph itself, which is really nice because then you can identify things within the graph right where they are. So if you look at the graph, down here there's this large T. And if I click it, I have a couple options. I can change the color of the text and I can change the size. It's kind of limited, but that's what I can do. So I'm going to make my size kind of big. And over here, maybe I want to describe what this shaded area means. So I'm going to use text that's red to go with my shaded area. So once I pick my color and my size, when I click on the graph, it creates a little text box and I can just type text. So this is all the solutions to the red graph. So I might describe it that way. So in my graph itself, I now have some explanation of what I understand is going on. I'm showing my work. I've showed a graph, but now I'm explaining what it means to me. And I might say the dotted line means none of these are solutions. So I could get another text box out and do the same thing. Dotted line are not true solutions. Right, so I could do a lot, and you can add lots of different text and move it around. And let's say I want them to describe what this point means. So this is a point, oh, and it's in standard form right now, which is very exciting. If I wanted to put it in decimal form, I could go up here to my settings and change it to decimal form. But maybe I want them to explain what that point is. Like, what is this point right here? This point, whoops, not this one. What's the point that has both red and blue? What does that point mean? So I could get another text sticky and say, this is the point that is a solution, is in the solution set, but not truly a solution because of this right here. It's on the dotted line. So I can use text within my graph to also help explain and show my work and justify what's happening in my graph. So another option besides just the text box. So that's in graph. So you have the text down here at the bottom. So if I open up a geometry sticky, I also have very similar abilities, right? So let's say I have students, and I'm just gonna do a couple things in geometry. If you've not worked with geometry, this is a full-on geometry. Oh my gosh, my mouse is going crazy. Tool, so I'm just gonna put a couple things here. So I'm gonna, let's say I'm having students identify parts of circles or lines that intersect circles. So maybe, and I might want to change my colors. So you can do a lot of different things in geometry. You can change the color. I'm going to go get a line, and I want a line that goes through the circle. Make sure they're actually on. There we go. Perfect. And maybe I want a tangent. So let's change the color again. And tangent is a construction in geometry, so I can do a tangent to the curve. So when I click that, there's a tangent at that point, and I can move it, and the tangent will move to match wherever that point is. So let's say this is the students, and they're trying to show me that they understand what these different lines are, right? They've constructed something, and now I want them to make sure that they explain what these things are. So there's a couple ways in geometry that you can add text and description. So one of them is, if you click on an object and you go to visible, the labeling is a way that you can add text. So I can change that line's label to actually be what it is. So I can say that's a tangent. And so when I hit it, now I've highlighted, I've identified what that object is by using its label. And if I move that object, because I use the label will move with it. It kind of stays relatively close to it. So that's one way I can justify and explain what's going on in using text within the geometry sticky, is to change the label of something. And that's by clicking it and going to visible and just adding words to the label. Oops, that's a chord. Right, so that's one way. I can also, just like in the graph, add text somewhere on my screen. So it's in a slightly different place. It's not on the sticky itself. It's down here where you see A. So obviously A means text. So if I click that, it's the same thing. I can add a text box, basically, if I've selected that. That's my tool. I'm using the text tool. And so I can say these represent the lines that intersect circles, right? So that could be what is going on here, and I can move that around the screen. So again, students can use text and descriptors to help explain their thinking or show what they understand about something that they've constructed or graphed, those types of things. So there's 3 different places within Classpad.net where you can be adding text. So within the graph, within the geometry, and then obviously a text sticky. So lots of different ways depending on how they want to explain their work to you is a different thing. So any questions before I move on?
Nope, I don't see any.
Okay. So I kind of wanted to end with one of the features. I've already shown you how you can easily share activities with students simply by creating a URL, sending it to them, they duplicate, work on the problem, and send back their URL version of the same work. So that's one way to do homework and work with students. There is another way that I'm still kind of grappling with, and we're really working on trying to make sharing between students and teachers a little easier, but it's still kind of in a rough stage right now because they're working on it. But I wanted to show you the homework exploration. So I have an activity here, and this is an activity that I'm going to send to students because maybe it's their homework that I want them to explore tonight. So this is basically showing them a parent function, and we're focused on transformations. And so I have different coefficients added to the parent function that are controlled by sliders. And so I tell students, okay, I'm going to send this to you, and I want you to do this for homework. I want you to explore what each coefficient seems to do to the parent function, and then I want you to be writing your observations. So this is the observations I want you to write, and see if you can describe these coefficients to me, what they do to that function, and we're going to talk about this tomorrow, right? So I want them to do this for homework. So I go up here and I start off exactly as I did before. I go to share, and I want to share the URL, but this time I actually want to assign it as a homework. I want to check how many students have actually done it. And again, this is very rudimentary, just so you know. So you have the option when you're in URL, so private, to make a homework. So when I click homework, I get this button here, and when I click that, I can actually assign a due date. So let's say this is homework tonight, so it's due tomorrow. And that means students have to make sure that they have done the work by tomorrow. So I've given it a date. Maybe you're giving them a project and you have something, you know, a week away or 2 weeks, but you can give it a date. You also have to give it a password, and I don't know why, but it is required. So the password, And here's what I suggest is you can use the same password for every paper because every paper has a unique URL. So if you were to do this with students, my suggestion would be always use the same password. So, you know, for me, my class is Greenhouse 1, right? So that's the password. Every time I send them a paper that has a password, that's the password that it is. Or if, you know, if it's your algebra class, maybe you just say algebra. But there is a limit. If you don't do the right, it's a typical password. It's got to be at least 8 characters long. You need to have a lowercase and an uppercase and a number. So it will give you an error if you don't make a good password. So this is my password. So I've now assigned this paper, right? So I say, okay, I apply this. I copy the URL, and I'm going to send you guys the URL. And I want you to open it up. Don't do anything. I just want you to open it up and notice what's different than what I did before when I sent you something. Because you'll see it's different because I assigned it as a homework. And again, password is Greenhouse 1. There's the password. So everybody take this.
One thing you can also do, just to jump in real quick, Karen, is if you have like algebra and you have first, third, and fifth period algebra classes, you can, you know, have a different password for each class period. That way, if you have to change up any of the papers, you can do that, you know, and that's kind of ties into also having your folder set up a certain way in your account.
Right, right.
So
I'm going to hit OK. And you should, hopefully you all were able to get in. So when you open it up, it looks different, slightly different. All right, so it's still a paper. It's still in as a guest, but down here at the bottom right, it'll tell you how many days you have before it's due. So this is saying 1 day later. So today it's due tomorrow, right? So if it were a week later, it'd say 7 days later. And then there's a submit and a save. Now, this is where the rudimentary stuff comes in. Students work on it, right? So they're going to explore, and they're going to see. Oh, I have to turn on the graphs. Sorry, I have the graphs hidden. So the directions tell them that unhide each equation one at a time and explore what that coefficient does. So like we are just exploring A right now. And so they are supposed to be writing their observations. So let's say a student works on this and they have finished. They hit submit, and it says once you've submitted it, you're not able to edit again. So they don't, if they're not ready, if they still think they have to do some more work, then they wouldn't hit it right now. So they can hit save. I'm going to say OK because I want to show you what happens. So it has been sent. Okay, that's not true. I'm saying this wrong. A notification has been sent to me, the teacher, that someone has submitted the paper. Unfortunately, we are not, like we don't have classes set in here, and I'm trying to find my activity. Where is my, oh, I have to refresh my page. Sorry about that. So I'm going to go into my, as a teacher, I'm in my class page. This is the paper that I sent you. And so it's showing me right now that one person has submitted the paper, meaning they finished. It doesn't tell me who submitted it. It doesn't actually give me the paper. So this is where I have, when I'm saying it's very rudimentary, but at least tells me that someone did it. So let's say I know I have 15 kids in my class. And it's all due by tomorrow. If tomorrow morning I look and there's only 2 people, I know that not everyone did their homework or submitted their homework, type of thing. So if somebody else wants to try to just hit submit, you don't have to do anything obviously, but if you want to hit submit, I'll just show you that it should add. I'll refresh. It should tell me that more than one person submitted. Nope, no one else submitted. I guess no one's doing their homework. Oh, Amy said she's done. We're gonna see if Amy actually did it. So assigning a homework really just means it's giving you a count of how many people are doing that homework. So if you know how many students are in your class, you can see, you know, I have what, 5 or 6, and only 3 of them have done it. Now I'm going to go back to the activity. This is me, the student. I submitted it. Notice there's now a button that says show the URL. And this is where this gets a little tricky. This URL is their copy of the homework. They need to copy the URL. If the teacher wants to actually see their work, they have to copy this URL and save it somewhere, like put it in their Google Classroom or send it to their teacher via email. This is a really important step, because if they don't do that, the paper is gone. So this is, I just actually sent a note to the R&D team and said, you know, where is it going? Because technically it's been saved somewhere, but where is it saved? Because it's not saved in the student's account. It's kind of saved in this homework Neverland. So an important thing if you're going to use this feature is that they make sure they copy URL and put it in their classroom web page or send it to their teacher or save it somewhere, because this is the copy of their homework. So this is why I'm saying it's very rudimentary, but it's, you know, right now it's a nice way to kind of count and assure that people are doing their homework. Now up here, technically, they've done their work. This is something that I would suggest they do. Save their work by duplicating it. So now I at least duplicate a copy within my own documents. So I send this URL to my teacher so they see my work, but I also hit duplicate and save a copy of the homework in my own paper so that I have it. So a couple steps the students have to take, and so this is where the rudimentary part gets in. But it is an option where you can assign a date for homework and, you know, kind of keep track of who's doing it. They are working on this. This is our paper management, so they are working on making this a little bit more streamlined, but, you know, it's still pretty new, so they're still working on how that's going to be addressed. So this is basically, I'm kind of finished. I just wanted to, the goal of today was to kind of show you different ways that students could be showing their work, justifying their mathematics, doing text within different representations so that they're really kind of showing you that they understand what's going on. So that was the goal, and also to how to share and get students to send things back to you after they have done their work. So I'm sort of done. So if anybody has any questions, they want to see something else, not necessarily related to this, I'm happy to, we have about 10 minutes left. I would be happy to, you know, show you things, answer questions. If not, then I'm finished. So if you have any questions or want to see something, I'm happy to do that in the chat panel. And I don't see anything. Everyone's very quiet. Getting ready for your Labor Day weekend holiday. All right, well, I am not seeing anything. So Amy, if you want to go back to the slideshow. Thank you very much for listening, and this will be recorded and I should have it up by tomorrow. So if you want to check out again different ways to help students kind of show their thinking, it'll be there.
Thank you, Karen, for that, and kind of sharing some of the ins and outs of sharing and, you know, using the technology a little bit more rather than just like in a demonstration tool. Appreciate that. So we do have a few more webinars coming up. When we hit October, we are actually kind of shortening our schedule a little bit just to kind of give Karen and I a little bit of a break for those of you that have been on the last few weeks with us.
Yay! Months, so, not weeks,
yeah,
months.
That's right, months. So the next webinar we have coming up is going to be on September 17th, and it is with Classpad.net again, as you can see. And then our next Classpad.net webinar is going to be on October 1st. And then we do have two webinars on our hardware. We're going to take a look at all our scientific calculators for those of you that are interested. That's on September 24th. And then also jumping back into our graphing calculators October 15th. So please, you know, join us again on one of those. We'd love to see you guys, I guess, or chat with you since we can't really see you. So on one of those. And then additionally, for those of you that have been on these before, we started a series on equity in education with TOTOS and with the Benjamin Banneker Association. So we have 2 of those webinars coming up pretty quickly next week, one on September 8th and one on September 10th at 7 p.m. So you can go to arcasioeducation.com/educators/webinars page to get to the registration link for those. We'd love to have you guys join us on those conversations.
Okay.
And lastly, that's it, actually. If you are interested in a certificate of attendance, for those of you that joined us live, you can email us at classpad.net@gmail.com. Reminder that is just purely a note that says you joined us for an hour. Unfortunately, we are unable to offer you any true kind of credit for that.
But hopefully districts now are just accepting seat hours of your personal.
Right. Just being a little bit more lenient
crossed,
with how they treat professional development. So, and then, follow us on social media if you have not already done so. And as Karen mentioned, this webinar has been recorded and will be on our YouTube channel tomorrow morning.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for everyone's participation. Really appreciate that. And thank you again. Have a great night. Have a great holiday weekend.